From mysterious origins to alien invasions, this is the unlikely history of Battleship. Now, it all starts around the year 1900, where we credit a man named Cliffort Von Wickler for creating a pen and paper game that would be the precursor to Battleship. And right away, this is where the story gets a little unusual. When you try to look up and find any information about Von Wickler outside of his creation of Battleship, there's nothing to be had. No family history, nothing. Well, it turns out that I wasn't the only one that thought this was curious. Internet historian Theodor Lauppert had done a deep dive and genealogically researched the name Von Wickler and found nothing. He asserted that it's possible that Cliffort Von Wickler was a name made up by Milton Bradley when they released their edition in 1967. But even this conjecture of his is actually conjecture. I find a lot of quotes for Theodor Lauppert online, but I had a hard time sourcing his actual writings at first. That's when I discovered that Mr. Lauppert had passed away sometime in 2017. He maintained a website where he had a ton of highly detailed write-ups on classic and rare computer games. I'll have a link in my description because his research is extremely thorough. So I am inclined to believe that he did dot his I's and cross his T's while researching Cliffort Von Wickler. But I found it actually kind of ironic that the historian, the relatively well-respected historian at that, who researched Von Wickler and asserted that there's no evidence Von Wickler existed, had their own evidence eventually fall off as it was only available online. Now, thankfully, the wonderful people at the Internet Archive and the Wayback Machine were able to save certain backups of his website while it was still up. So the link in the description is actually to the Internet Archive Wayback Machine, but many of the links on his page for his game write-ups are still there, and they're very interesting. But I found that history, though it doesn't repeat every time, it often echoes, and this is a fine example. If we have a historian trying to determine whether or not the creator of the game exists, and then after that historian passes, many of the records about their existence become very difficult to attain. And for a while for me, while researching this, it was hard to prove that Theodor Lauppert was a real person. Now, he was a real person, he is very well respected and did great work, but I thought that was an interesting note in Battleship's history right there. Now, getting back to the game proper, the first actual written accounts of the game's existence actually come from a Russian poet named Ryurik Ivnev. Now, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, but Ivnev was attending a military academy around the year 1907 and made a diary entry outlining the game of Salvo, which is very similar to Battleship, except for instead of guessing one coordinate at a time when players take their turn, players would get to guess one coordinate for every ship that they had that was still live, basically shooting a salvo of rounds at the enemy. Interesting there. So, this also leads a lot of people to speculate that soldiers were playing Battleship even in the trenches of World War I, which, depending on paper availability, maybe, I don't know. Anyway, it's widely conjectured that even though Cliffort Von Wickler is credited with the invention of Battleship, more than likely it was a traditional game played by school children, and that's why no patent was ever actually issued for it. In 1931, when printing became much cheaper, a company called Starex began printing salvo pads and selling those. Man, the 30s were really the beginning of the golden age of board games in the United States. We started getting Monopoly around that time. Anyway, the salvo pads were very popular, and Starex was not the only publisher. Many other publishers hopped in because there was no patent. And it wasn't until the 1960s that we started seeing the evolution of the game into what we know as Battleship. In 1964, a Hasbro employee named Ronald Brehio presented a wooden prototype of the game Battleship to some executives at Hasbro, hoping they'd pick up the project. They decided to not move forward with it. However, since he had invented the game as a Hasbro employee, the company retained the intellectual property, and as they put it in many of the documents I read about this, they confiscated the prototype. So I imagine some mean, nasty guy in a tie. No, Ronald, you give me that. Anyway, that's poor Ronald Brehio. He deserves some credit because in 1967, Milton Bradley released their plastic edition of Battleship, and it's widely believed that Hasbro sold the intellectual property and the prototype to Milton Bradley for production, which would make sense because Hasbro was more of a toy company at the time, and Milton Bradley being a game company, this would be a bit more fitting. Also, kind of interesting, it came out in the year 1967 alongside of like Ideal's Kerplunk. That's not too far off from Mousetrap as well. We were really seeing a boom in plastic games, particularly games that merged the world of toy and the world of game, which is kind of my favorite era on a personal note there. 10 years later in 1977, they also introduced Electronic Battleship, which interestingly enough, I have an ad for right here that came packed in with this 1984 edition. So in 77, we see the first electronic battleship. In 79, we also see the first video game adaptation, this one for the CompuColor Z80. So Battleship, again, ahead of its time. Now, if you ask me, the electronic battleship kind of overcomplicates it. I would be interested in reviewing the old and the new sometime because the modern one is just insane. It has a big display of an Amazon link in the description so that you can see it. It's pretty gnarly. It would be fun, but I think this is kind of the best way to make a portable version of the game that has these tactile qualities with the mini ships that I like so much. As well as it conserves paper. I mean, it serves its purpose. It's funny because I said Hangman was kind of a pointless game that was made not far off of this. In fact, I have a Hangman set that I reviewed not long ago that I likened the collapsible shells to Battleship. And Hangman I was a little bit more harsh about, but I feel like Battleship, because of the grid, Hangman doesn't take as much preparation. The grid for Battleship does. So this really conserves either more expensive graph paper or just your time setting up in between games. So I do think there's value to be had in a physical version of Battleship, whether or not it's wood or plastic, but it's happenstance that we were in the middle of our plastics boom at the time that this game got introduced. Now, interestingly enough, we've seen Battleship in 1967, Electronic Battleship in 1977. We've seen the CompuColor Z80 Battleship in 1979. Then we go to this one here. This is 1984. I've got the black and navy shells now, which are still actually physically the same size as the version from the 60s and 70s. Oh, and I want to point out, this is a 1971 edition, and the pieces and components are identical to the 67, but the biggest change is the cover art. When the game was first launched, the cover for Battleship probably would have been more at home in 1957, as it featured a happy father and son playing the game while the mother and daughter were doing dishes in the background. Yeah, didn't age well. Didn't age well. So they learned their lesson and made this one with a happy boy and girl playing in 1971. Much more fitting, much more fitting. And we see that echoed in 1984 here with this a little bit more, I don't know, stylistically. This, you know, the way that this titling is and everything, this kind of reminds me of like when they were advertising Rambo First Blood. This fits right at home in the 80s. With the styling. That being said, the build quality is really similar. However, I did notice that we've got these little printouts here behind the grid so that it looks like ocean water on that dark background. We've got the little chart here showing the different ships and how many hits they take. I did also notice that even though the ships seem to be molded the same size, I think there's a difference in the grid in the depth of the peg slots because the ships really don't fit all the way down, and so they end up wiggling with a little extra play, whereas the ones from the 60s and 70s don't. I also noticed a lot of excess plastic on the pegs, making them difficult to use in certain circumstances. Now, what makes this 1984 one really interesting to me is remember that it's conjectured that Hasbro sold Milton Bradley the rights sometime 1964 after being presented with the prototype. However, 20 years later, they purchased Milton Bradley, so this would have been the first year Battleship was produced by Hasbro. So a neat little footnote there. But quality-wise, what's interesting is design-wise, they're almost identical. And though I really like the print product in this with the little heads-up display and everything, in the end, the actual plastic components are inferior to the older ones. So interesting enough there. Now, Battleship was an iconic game for many, many decades, but its popularity began to wane around the mid-90s, and we started seeing closer to the 2000s, some variations being released by Hasbro that featured things like hexagonal maps and stuff like that. Now, this was retracted around the time that they released the movie Battleship in 2012. So they went back to the old grid design around that time. And I gotta say, if you have not seen the Universal Pictures Battleship movie from 2012, do yourself a favor. It is corny, hokey fun. It centers around a story where aliens invade Earth, and it was actually a really interesting artistic decision because one, you can market worldwide without having to involve a conflict between nations. And two, when the aliens were attacking the battleships, their weapons looked oddly like pegs that were slamming down on them. It's fun. It's too fun. They have a way better cast than deserves to be in this movie, and it's just pure popcorn silliness all the way through. I highly recommend that you see it. Then in 2022, we see this updated version of Battleship. We see that they start reducing the packaging. The game actually comes in just a simple cardboard sleeve, and you have the two different game boards that are designed to clip together, and you can carry them with this little carry handle. So it's more portable than ever. The ships have a more modern design, which at first I thought was very, very science fiction-y, but it turns out that a lot of modern naval vessels now actually have hulls shaped very similarly to what they have here. So even though it's meant to be fake and within the realm of the game, surprisingly, it's pretty close to accurate. One thing of note with the modern Battleship is the hit pegs and the miss pegs now are shaped different. The hit ones have a triangular head, the miss ones have a round head. You'll also notice the miss ones are no longer colored white, they're colored this bright sort of yellow, which at first I found a little bit confusing, but on my last video where I reviewed the older Battleship to this one, sans the 84, I did have some viewers comment that it was easier for them with different types of color blindness to differentiate these pegs, and having the shape made an even better effort at making sure that it was accessible. So kudos to Hasbro for making the game accessible, portable. Even the ships have this nice little storage spot here. So the game continued to evolve. This version came out in 2022. It's still the current and available. And I'll tell you what, they must have understood the assignment, because in 2025, Battleship was officially inducted into the National Toy Museum at the Strong Museum of Play. So all the way from 1900 to 2025, 125 years of Battleship, with some wild circumstances around its origin and crazy lineage, and the fact that this game is so genius in its simplicity. It's easy to teach. It's easy to translate into video game versions. In fact, if you want to play one, I've got a free-to-play version at oldcrappycouch.com. No download is required. It's supported by GameZop. It does occasionally serve ads, and those ads help support my channel. So you can support Old Crappy Couch and have fun doing it playing Battleship's Armada. Just follow the link in the description or scan that QR code right there. Yeah, I know, I've got some really neat stuff for you. Today you got free print and play Battleship on oldcrappycouch.com. You got a free video game version. What fun, what fun. I want to thank my couch potatoes, the channel members who make great videos like this possible. If you had a good time watching, make sure that you hit that like and subscribe, and consider becoming a couch potato so I can make more of these great historical deep dives for you. Can't wait to see you next time.